Hello, and welcome to today's webcast, Building Trust and Safeguarding Data in Modern Government. I'm Dan Lorman. I am a Senior Fellow at the Center for Digital Government, and I'm excited to serve as a moderator for today's event. Just want to say thank you for joining us, and I know we're in for an informative session over the next 30 minutes. We have a few brief housekeeping notes for you on the screen. Also, during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTechLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learning from today's webcast. Joining me for today's discussion, as I push the slide here, is Liana Bailey-Crimmins, CTO for the state of California, and Kathy Cruz, who's Director of Government Cybersecurity Practice at KPMG, and she's on the phone. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you.
And want to just briefly give you a little bit more about their backgrounds and their bios. So first of all, Liana Bailey-Crimmins, with more than 30 years of public sector experience, she was appointed to be CDT's Deputy Director of the Office of Technology Services and State Chief Technology Officer. In her previous positions, Bailey-Crimmins served as the Chief Information Security Officer at the California Public Employees Retirement System since 2019, where she led and oversaw the team's responsibility for protecting the private data of nearly 2 million CalPERS members and a $400 billion investment portfolio. She also served as CalPERS Chief Health Director from 2017 to 2019 and as its Chief Information Officer from 2013 to 2017. Before joining CalPERS, she was the Information Technology Director and CIO of California Correctional Healthcare Services and Project Director of the California Information Technology Infrastructure Project. In 2015, Bailey-Crimmins was honored with the prestigious CIO of the Year Award from the California CIO Academy. Kathy Cruz is the Director of KPMG's Technology Enablement Practice, advising government clients on building digital trust through cyber strategies, risk mitigation practices, and strengthened operational controls. Focusing on integrating cybersecurity initiatives throughout the enterprise, she helps clients mature their cybersecurity programs and create the needed flexibility to address the changing cyber landscape. Kathy helps government clients focus on building cybersecurity resilience for their organizations, supporting business objectives and services to the public. With more than 30 years of experience in the information technology and cybersecurity areas, she has been an officer of 2 public companies and is 5-time Chief Information Officer, CIO, with background across all IT and business domains. Her strong track record of thought leadership, collaboration, and transformation has won industry recognition, and she was named by CIO Magazine as one of the top 100 CIOs. So we have an incredibly great panel today, and it's an exciting topic. I just want to give a brief intro of the topic on building trust. We really want to do here your questions, so you can put your questions in. We're going to get to those near the end. But at this time, with no further ado, I really want to hand it off to Kathy, so Kathy and Liana can have a conversation on this topic of building trust and safeguarding data. So Kathy, take it away.
Thanks, Dan. I apologize for the technical difficulties as well. I wish I was able to see you, or at least have you see me. So, Liana, you and I have had this conversation over the past several months around modern government and with that, modern trust. So as government entities implement their vision for modern government by enhancing the citizen and constituent experience, modernizing their support functions, reinventing operations, and building stakeholder and citizen trust, the modern data center is now front and center in this transformation. With data on-prem and in multiple clouds and increased reliance on third parties, it's never been more important to ensure that citizens can trust that the personal data they share with government is protected to the highest standards. And so how do you see data centers transforming to support modern government?
Well, hi, Kathy. I would love to have seen you as well, but I know we plow through, even through technology challenges, right, in this day of age. So Kathy and I have known each other for quite a while professionally, And I jumped at the opportunity, obviously, to participate. Not only do I believe leadership requires trust to develop high performance, but obviously overseeing California's largest public data center is pretty important. So I believe, Kathy, as you and I've talked about, is that modern data centers have that opportunity to advance the future of government. And we always talk about this, but it's really connecting the people, the process, and the technology. And we do this through a circle of trust. And so what that does is incorporates, I call the 3 S's. It's scalability, so that it can actually, scale up and scale down as business needs change. Is stable, that is there when you need it, right? That, it's uptime, availability, and something near and dear to both our hearts is it's secure. And I think sometimes people think of data centers as like compute and storage. And the way I view data centers, it's more of a trusted partnership. When I first started in the late 80s, I remember my colleague telling me that basically, if people don't know you exist, you are having a good day. And when they told me that, I was like, okay, so they view data centers as a utility, that you just plug it in and, if things are working, like electricity, things are great. And I really see it differently. I feel that a modern data center, that in order to enable modern government, works shoulder to shoulder with its departments and with its constituents. And we talk through the type of data that's going to be stored, the layers and depths of security controls and standards, because not all data is equal, right? So is it confidential and sensitive? Does it have the business resiliency and the uptime necessary to address specific use cases? And a big thing that I'm about is mapping the data, the flow through your data center to make sure that the solution has the horsepower when it needs it. That's when you hit that gas pedal, that it does what it needs to do in a secure manner. And I also understand that no one size fits all. Business partners need a choice. And so part of that is sitting down and talking about, is the data, should it be in a hybrid environment? Should part of it be on premise? Should part of it be in the cloud? Should it all be on premise? Making sure that we understand, again, for performance and security, what's right for them. And you and I have talked about this. I know we kind of went back and forth about Gartner's 2025 prediction is that 80% of enterprises, I know that's not all just government, it's also private, that they're potentially shutting down their traditional data centers. A lot of CIOs and CTOs that I've talked to, they want to get out of, the hardware business per se. They're closest to the business. They want to focus on the application. They'd rather have someone else manage and maintain the physical infrastructure. Not in all circumstances, but in a lot of circumstances. And data centers, and I also, this analogy, is our high performing engines inside a hopefully built sports car. And so, Kathy, I think you would agree, if you have a really good engine, I can have a really good shell of a car, but if it doesn't have an engine, you're not going to get where you need to go. And you may not, obviously, if it's a bad engine, you're not going to probably get there very safely or securely. So I see that modern data centers really have a vital role in modern government.
Well, I agree with you on, the engine and the car. But as all of us know, we continue to upgrade our cars from time to time, one, to maybe get new features and functionality. But as cars have evolved, they've also become safer, where you don't just have now one airbag, you have airbags everywhere. So, using that analogy, modernization depends a lot on replacing obsolete technology, just like replacing the car to get, whatever new features, but again, the security features. So an outdated programming language or unsupported hardware and software, they're not the only barriers to modernization, but they probably present the greatest vulnerabilities to modernization and to the data center, and then by extension to the trust of citizens of where their data is being held and how protected that data is. So when we think about the modernization of the data center, which is really just another cloud, right? It's a cloud. Elevating it so that the government's ability to serve the citizens and by doing so, improving the internal efficiencies and enhancing that employee work experience is also pretty important. They kind of go hand in hand, right? So as you want to digitize and improve the customer experience in that modernization effort, doing so also means adding trust as a surrounding enveloping it in trust, right? So how do you in a data center, using the analogy of, well, it used to be a utility and now it's something else, how do you instill that sense of trust both throughout the workforce but also by extension to the citizens and their data?
Well, I agree. Like a car, like a house, you can't just build it or run it, up to 100,000 miles and not continue to invest in it. And so, at least for us at the State Data Center, people think of the IBM environment that's running COBOL. They think that that's outdated. It's legacy. No piece of hardware in my IBM mainframe environment is older than 3 years old, and it's running. It has the ability to do artificial intelligence with IBM Watson. So you can continue to evolve. The good thing is that I think by the time we talk, a new tech firm has come out with the latest and greatest technology. So I think it's very important that the infrastructure be there. It's a shared responsibility when it comes to infrastructure, because a lot of times you're not ultimately responsible for the application. So you are working with departments to make sure that the applications are also patched and that they're also maintained. COBOL, as we've talked about, is Reuters did an analysis about 2 years ago, and I think 90% of all ATMs are still running COBOL. They're very transactional. They're doing exactly what they need to do. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have trust in it if it's performing the way it needs to. I think what we have to do is focus on, does that system still satisfy the business need? And if not, how do you establish a new design thinking or a new way of approaching the application that thinks of a human-centric approach, and ensuring that both at the application layer, at the database layer, the OS layer, that you have the layers and layers of protection. You have the right leadership in both circumstances, because we've learned from data breaches, large, I'm not going to say names, but banks that had thrown a lot of money and had the latest technology and had everything, humming like it's supposed to. And then all of a sudden, because a human being wasn't watching the logs and wasn't paying attention, potentially alert, the process broke down and there was a data breach. So that's why I say it takes people, process, and technology.
Let's talk about people a little bit. Because transparency and accountability ultimately drive trust with citizens. But with data everywhere, is the role of the data owner and the data custodian changing from that traditional model into something else?
Absolutely. So I remember the days from a data owner perspective. Obviously, they are the ones that usually typically the business area. And then it was up to IT to decide how, where, when, what the data, where it was stored. What I've seen is that, especially over the past 7 years, that more and more services are now available via cloud service providers. And it's important, and I've seen that IT and business have to mature their risk management program. They have to decide what the risk appetite is. If business is off issuing a purchase order for a piece of software and they're storing confidential information in the cloud because it was really easy to just do a purchase order that doesn't require legal or a CISO to review, that data may be out there and it shouldn't be out there. And so that's where business needs to talk to IT. And the same thing with IT is, all of a sudden, if you have confidential or sensitive constituent data, and you as the CIO have decided you're going to store it in a cloud provider, does the business know or have the risk appetite, or do you even have the right agreements in place to protect that information and hold that vendor accountable? So it really has become a joint risk responsibility. And as long as you've established the risk appetite, it's always interesting to talk to executives on risk appetite, because they're like, I have zero risk appetite. we know that's not, we can't ever afford zero risk appetite, right? So what is, from a downtime, what is the loss of data that people are willing to accept? If the confidential and sensitive information is something that they have no appetite, then maybe it shouldn't be in the cloud. So I think that needs to be a conversation that's governed at the business and IT level. It's no longer just IT's responsibility.
Well, it seems to me that government in general needs to demonstrate a positive track record of ensuring citizens' privacy and data security in order to gain that confidence of the citizen. As systems evolve and the citizen experience becomes front and center, citizens want all of their data to be unified, if you will, into a single experience, not to be siloed if they are receiving multiple government services, benefits. They pay taxes, they get their DMV license, they may have access or needs for other services. And so to gain the trust of the citizen, it seems to me that track record has to be pretty long for citizens to feel comfortable that I can continue to receive services and actually expand my digital footprint in order to be able to interact more efficiently with government and to interact the way I want to, which is for me from my phone. Do you see, though, that might mean a greater investment in technology and practices to safeguard the data, and with that, almost elevate that role of data ownership and data custodian because it is now placed in such a high level of trust?
Well, as we talked about, trust and security is not just IT's responsibility. So I will say, coming from a financial institution, spending the last 7.5 years looking at, over 2 million, unique identifiers of both the pension level from a PII and a PHI. I agree. You can't just, as a government official, you can't just, trust me, and that'll be fine. There is a stakeholder piece of that, and so part of what we did is we quarterly provided information that we could share publicly. Share how at a high level what types of practices we were putting in place. We actually met with the board on an ongoing basis to talk about the security practices, fiduciary responsibilities. We actually did a lot of education at the member level. It takes all of us to protect the data. It's not just, I'll give you my data, we'll walk away and everything's great. If you happen to be a victim of identity theft, notify us that you have been a victim of identity theft, because we can put extra layers of protection on your account so people can't change banking account information or address information, that we could do that if we allow each of us to do our different lines of defense. Not everyone can be a quarterback, not everyone is a center, but we all need to understand our responsibilities. And so I agree that it takes the full gamut of all of us to be responsible. And when it comes to government and security, one of the things we have to look at is, again, looking at the type of data. There are crown jewels. No one technology should be responsible for, if one technology fails, there should be an extra layer of technology. If you are using cloud providers, I believe in a single pane of glass, using CASBs and those types of solutions, so that not only are you monitoring, managing your technology and security controls and policies on premise, but you can see what the vendors are doing on behalf of you and your data. And I also believe it's very important that we realize that when we're doing contracts with third-party vendors, that not all reseller agreements, they may be willing to sign the security terms, but those don't always pass through to the vendor that's actually hosting and housing your data. So being very careful with that. Don't doing quick agreements. Make sure it's a company you want to even do business with. So there's a lot of responsibility to go around.
Let me ask you about that. So as more and more services are provided to citizens electronically, digitally, now where data is in multiple clouds, on-prem, but the use of third parties is far more prominent in order to bring these unified services to the citizens. So what additional challenges does that make as that footprint of third parties has significantly expanded? What are the new challenges of building trust and safeguarding data when it is in the hands of others? There might be sharing agreements with other agencies. You know, the footprint's gotten larger, but so has the risk.
Absolutely, and I think we learned from the very publicized Target data breach that even though they had very robust security practices, that doesn't necessarily mean, in this case, it was HVAC or it was a third party. Not all third party affiliates have the same security provisions. So, you know, really understanding when you put your information with a company or with the government, our job is to make sure that all affiliates are responsible equally. And the other things that, boards and government officials is seeing third-party risk is something that is, they need to track it. They need to make sure that it is on their radar when it comes to risk. And just because, and we've talked about this, is just because you've moved your data to the cloud does not mean that it's no longer your responsibility. You still have the ultimate responsibility to the taxpayers, to the constituents and residents of California. So a third-party vendor breach is your responsibility regardless of where that data is. So having to do due diligence, making sure that people understand contracts are not enough to protect the business. Just because you do a contract does not mean you shouldn't be doing independent audits. Making sure that I always say my auditors are my best friends, because if I don't know about something, I can't fix it. And making sure that they do the SOC 2 or FedRAMP SOC, those are independent audits to validate, trust but verify, and understanding that when you are entering code, one of the things I believe is the process is before you enter new code into a system, that we need to actually do penetration testing and build that into our environment before you put it out there, because that developer may not have realized they created a security hole by turning on a new piece of functionality. So, again, it's not just third party, but it is us as the data custodians and it's the data owner. It's a full ecosystem. We have equal responsibility.
Dan, I'm going to turn it back to you to see, take us through the questions.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Kathy. Great conversation with Liana. Wow, really, really great points. We do have some questions coming in from the audience, and we maybe have time for one or two more if people still want to get those in. But question from Lexi Kibetz is, what is the perceived value towards StateRAMP and or FedRAMP requirements or preference? And obviously StateRAMP, you guys may want to go ahead and I could say FedRAMP is federal compliance requirements for federal systems. StateRAMP is more of I'm on the board of StateRAMP myself. It's a more of a collaboration amongst a wide variety of organizations and states around compliance. What are your thoughts, Kathy and or Liana?
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. FedRAMP obviously has been around for a very long time and applies to cloud. And it applies to the security controls around cloud. And in many cases, at the state level, you're receiving federal dollars for many of the programs. And so, FedRAMP and CISO are the right probably frameworks that you're using. But it's big, and it can be also very cumbersome and very costly. Tying back into what Liana said about crown jewels, you don't protect everything the same way, right? Sure. So you don't protect your visitor's log the same way you protect, health data. I mean, there's a big gap between. So, I think there's a role for both. StateRAMP is really, I would say, in more of the early stages in terms of being reviewed and even adopted, where FedRAMP is far more mature and within the NIST family, which the state is through their state administrative manual is NIST compliant. NIST is the framework. But I don't think it's an either or. We get caught up sometimes in technology that it has to be one or the other, and an and can be equally as good.
Great. Liana, do you want to add anything to that or go on to the next question?
I mean, the only thing that I'm always conscious of, always being public sector, I always put my hat on, is, certifications cost a lot of money. And so being FedRAMP, SOC 2, Type 2, that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to companies every year. And so, obviously, if it's confidential, sensitive information I'm put in the cloud, I want it to be FedRAMP. I mean, that is one of our requirements in our FedRAMP moderate, at least. I know states are looking at doing StateRAMP within their because they can't qualify for FedRAMP. And so, it would be the type of data that would be stored in that would be what would be, in my opinion, the differentiator. But we just have to also be conscious. I know the and, but every time you add an and, it's a lot more money. And we are in capitalist society, and so every time we add more money to the vendor community, it does travel back down to us in the government that have to pay for those services. So I have to be conscious of that too.
That's a very good point. It's excellent point in that, for government to be efficient and cost effective, there needs to be some tailoring and some thoughtful considerations on direction as well. So, yeah, good point. None of us like to hear that the cost is going up without the associated benefit to it.
Well, we're getting short on time here, so maybe just give each of you 30 seconds to give us one final thought. What one takeaway would you really want the audience to remember about the session if they thought back about this a few days from now? A lot of fantastic points from both of you, but what maybe kind of a gold nugget to leave with the audience? Start with you, Kathy, and then go to Liana.
The takeaway, I think, is that modernization is not a project. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and an end where you then walk away and say, we've modernized our government technologies and services to our citizens. We've built in trust. We're done. Let's move on to the next. It should always be evolving and should always be citizen-centric. But as it is evolving and it is changing, trust has to be built in right from the beginning because it is becoming more critical in terms of how citizens receive their services, but also in how they interact with government. So the trust piece is elevated, I think, as high as the modernization.
Great. Thanks, Liana.
Well, I was always raised that trust is earned, and I mean, that's what we hear all the time. And it takes one time, one incident to break that trust. And so no matter what industry you're in, I think it's just very important as we look at what we put in when regarding to people, process, and technology, that we're thinking of that we are responsible for very important information, and we may need to make really wise decisions. And as Kathy was talking about modernization, I also think that, more and more about risk management. I can't tell you enough that it's important to make good, wise decisions based on the level of risk an organization is willing to take. And continue to modernize, continue to invest, but don't walk into any situation blindly, because more likely it's going to bite you at some point in time. So make sure you trust but verify no matter who you do business with.
Great points. Thank you so much for that. But I want to be respectful of our time commitment, so I have to wrap it up here. In closing, I would just like to thank Kathy and Liana for sharing their insights for today's webcast. I would also like to thank KPMG for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion today. And also, I'd like to thank you, our audience, for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon at another government technology event. The webinars are available on demand. You can go to webinars.govtech.com. We'll get you that information. We hope you have a great rest of your day. So long.